Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Charity Village webinar. We will wait just a moment for everyone to join the session. Okay, we will get started. Welcome to today's Charity Village webinar. My name is Charlie, and I am the graphic designer and marketing coordinator with Charity Village. As we are gathering here on a virtual platform, it is important to acknowledge that each of us is joining the webinar from the ancestral or unceded lands of the Inuit, Métis, and First Nation people. As a settler on this land, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. For those who may be joining a Charity Village webinar for the first time, Charity Village is Canada's largest online job board for the nonprofit sector. In addition to our online job board, organizations can also post volunteer positions, so if you are looking for work or to recruit talent in the sector, Charity Village is a great place to start. We also have tons of excellent resources for nonprofit professionals, including online courses, articles, fundraising tools, and free webinars like the one we are presenting today. Before we start today's webinar, I would like to quickly run through some housekeeping items. You may have noticed that when you join the webinar, you are automatically put on mute. Since we have hundreds of participants in today's session, it is important for us to minimize the amount of background noise so that everyone can clearly hear the presentation. But you can still ask questions and make comments using the question box at the bottom of the Zoom control panel. Look for that towards the bottom of your screen. We will be taking questions at the end of the webinar, so please submit your questions as you think of them, and we will do our best to get to as many as possible. You can also email your questions to webinars@charityvillage.com. If you happen to encounter any technical issues with the webinar, whether with viewing the presentation or with the audio, please let us know in the question box or by sending us an email. We will do our best to get any technical difficulties resolved as quickly as possible, but in a worst case scenario, please remember that we are recording today's webinar and we will send you the full recording by email tomorrow. So if you get called away or disconnected, you will still be able to view the full presentation. And with that, I would like to welcome our presenters for today, Rochelle Greaves and Roxanne Tacky, co-founders of StoryPoint Consulting. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Charlie. We're really happy to welcome everyone to our session this afternoon, Fundraising for Small Nonprofits, Cultivating Donor Support, and Timing the Ask. And we're really pleased to be with you here today. Now, just to give you a quick background about us, Roxanne and I are sisters, and we work primarily with small grassroots nonprofits, those who are new to the nonprofit sector, or experienced professionals who are looking for fundraising training. And our approach to fundraising is simple and practical, and we really strive to create solutions for organizations that are not only within their capacity, but that they can implement immediately.
And before we get started today, we would first like to acknowledge that I'm located in Manitoba, and I am located on Treaty 1 land. Rochelle is in Southern Ontario, and her land is covered by the Williams Treaties. And we acknowledge and celebrate Indigenous communities in Canada that have a rich history of contributions to Canadian society and still continue to contribute their gifts and talents. As Black Canadians whose ancestors were not the purveyors of colonialism, we do acknowledge that we benefit from colonialism, and we have an honest desire to work in partnership with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration, both now and in the future.
So today, we're going to talk about the role and importance of knowing your organization's story in cultivating donor support. Then we'll talk a bit about donor motivation and how to best communicate with donors with different motivations. Then we'll discuss helpful strategies and skills for speaking about your organization in a persuasive and confident way. And finally, we'll discuss some ways you can know when it's time to move from storytelling to making the ask? Or in other words, how do we pull the plug and eventually ask the donor to make a gift? Now, first things first, whenever we present on the topic of fundraising, especially for people who are not professional fundraisers, many people feel a bit uncomfortable. And this is because for many of us, when we think of fundraising, we think of not so fun tasks. Perhaps you associate fundraising with your child's school fundraiser, and you think about how you have to approach family members and ask them to buy chocolate bars that they may or may not want. Or maybe you're thinking of your own organization and it feels intimidating to ask community members to donate to your cause. Or perhaps there's a fear of rejection, which can cause normal and genuine emotions of discomfort or disappointment. But we're going to present something different today. We love this quote from Henry Rosso that states, "Fundraising is the gentle art of teaching the joy of giving." And many of us think that we're burdening others or bothering people by asking for a donation. But if your organization can do a great job communicating the importance of your cause, you can really help get the general public excited about something that matches their values. They'll feel great about supporting your cause and helping you accomplish your goal, all because you gave them an opportunity to support something that they value. Now, if I were to ask any of you, what value does your cause provide to the community? What would you say? For example, if an organization's mission is to provide sport and recreation opportunities, and I ask them, what is the value or the benefits to the community? They'd likely give me answers like sports and recreation create strong communities. It builds relationships and creates healthier, happier, and safer communities. And I could go on. No matter what cause an organization supports, the work is not possible without sustainable funding. And I'm sure that we'd all advocate for the government to provide more funds to support the nonprofit sector. However, another way to ensure a strong and sustainable sector is to raise funds from the community. Your job is to be able to effectively communicate the benefit of your work to others and get them as excited about the cause as you are. So then the work of fundraising becomes less about asking for funds and more about communicating the benefits of your organization. So, what does a story have to do with fundraising? Well, most nonprofits are centered around a single purpose, and that's known as your organization's mission, which drives everything that you do. So it's really important that you take the time not only to learn the mission and the values of your organization, but also learn to clearly articulate your value in the community to others who don't have the same familiarity with what you do. A successful fundraiser can tell a story that inspires people to donate and helps them to understand not only how their gift will be used, but also the larger impact the gift will have in the community. Now in Canada, there are thousands of charities, including the many represented in today's webinar. Therefore, a challenge in developing the story you share with donors will be to create a narrative that is unique, memorable, and one that stands out in the crowd. Because when you think about it, donors have a lot of options, and there are many excellent organizations that people can support in the community. So how do you make your story stand out? So let's talk about what makes a memorable story. First, it describes the conflict, struggle, or scenario that needs to be overcome. Why was your organization founded in the first place? What is it that you're fighting for in the community? What opportunities are you trying to create? Also, how can you make this information easily digestible for the public who may not understand the ins and outs of your cause? Most organizations tend to use language that is understood within their sector, but perhaps not broadly known. So, for example, individuals who work in housing and homelessness might use words like harm reduction, or people who work in environmental causes might speak of greenhouse gas emissions. Don't assume that the public understands the issues the way that you do, since you're truly experts in your field. So describe your conflict clearly and plainly. Next, focus on people. If you can, provide one story of someone who benefited from your organization. Testimonials are a fantastic way to focus on the memorable story of one person. And remember, when using personal stories, always seek consent from the individual whose story you'd like to share with donors. And if it's a vulnerable person, always protect their privacy. If you have a wonderful community member who's a great speaker, it's a good idea to invite them to share their own story so donors can hear it firsthand, as this tends to be particularly memorable and impactful. Also, be transparent about your organization's story. There's no need to exaggerate facts to impress donors. Your goodwill and trustworthiness as a nonprofit is incredibly important and should not be damaged just to tell a movie-worthy story. For example, if your organization serves a small number of people, you don't have to pretend that you serve many. Simply explain the depth of the impact your organization has when working even with a small group. And finally, highlight what's important. Particularly for organizations that have a long history, there can be a desire to give donors a lot of information to showcase your importance in the community. But providing a donor with concise information can be enough to help donors make a decision on whether to support your cause. Now, on the note of memorable storytelling, we'd like to take a moment to speak about how to tell stories, and particularly when you would like to share a story or testimonial about people who have received support from your organization. Now, we know stories are important and that we should share them, but there are stories we really shouldn't share, which brings us to how not to tell a story. And what I'm about to present is great information shared by Cherise Floyd Thompson, who is a marketing and communications consultant, whose organization is called Witness My Life. And she allowed us to share these tips from a resource that she developed. And I highly recommend that you check out her resources on stories nonprofits should not tell. Now, the first type is exploitative stories. Whether it's a story told through words or a picture, exploitative stories are those where we focus on marginalized traits, or more often, stereotypes, as the central feature to tell a story. An example is a child or a picture of a child living with a disability, seemingly struggling, used in a nonprofit advertisement without even knowing the story of a child. This type of practice is harmful and perpetuates stereotypes. We're not the author of another person's story and can't make a judgment on their experience. Also, we must respect people's personal information and be careful when sharing personal stories that have identifying information. What you can do is ask for permission or ask the person if they would like to speak on their own behalf rather than you telling the story. Or change identifying information such as their name or age. Also, in regards to asking people to share a story of trauma, really consider what the purpose of this is. An example is asking a residential school survivor to relive their trauma and share their story. Is the purpose to impress donors? Then perhaps it's the wrong choice to ask them to do this. Also, when people are giving you their time in this way, it is best to compensate them for their work. The next one is hero stories, where we as an organization position ourselves as the savior. Sometimes we can even position the donor, and in particular, the wealthy white donor, as the savior that has come in and saved the day for a particular group or community. This can come off as quite distasteful, particularly to traditionally marginalized communities. Roxanne and I worked with a nonprofit that serves the 2S LGBTQ plus community, and a donor who had made publicly harmful and discriminatory comments about this community had publicly stated that they wanted to support this organization to position themselves as an ally. The community organization was concerned that an association with this prospective donor would be distasteful to their community, and rightly so. This is an example of a person looking to use the hero narrative. What you can do within your nonprofit to avoid this harmful practice is use stories as an example of the benefits that you truly provide and talk about how you can enhance people's lives, but not save them or solve all problems. And finally, happily ever after stories, where we basically share this community was awful until we came along and now it's great for them. We cannot claim responsibility for the happiness of those who have benefited from our organization. Roxanne and I worked on a project with an organization that serves families with neurodiverse children, and they have a strong belief that their team is staffed with people with both clinical experience of working with children with various cognitive disabilities, but also lived experience, because often those without firsthand experience have gotten it wrong. So when using stories, always exercise caution on your wording and ensure you're not appearing to take responsibility for someone else's success story. But what you can do is talk about how you work in partnership with the community to enhance people's lives. And it's not all about your organization. Now, a question that you might have is, what information should be highlighted when sharing your organization's story with donors? The answer is, it really depends on the donor and what motivates them to give to a cause. If each of you attending today took a moment to think about the reasons you give to charity, we'd likely receive several different answers. But in general, most donors are motivated by a few common reasons. Being aware of these motivations and understanding which ones motivate donors to your own organization can help you create messaging that will resonate most strongly with your donors. So here are some common motivators for donors and how you can appeal to them within the messaging of your story. The first motivation is to show gratitude. These donors are often motivated to pay back others because of help they've received in the past. Now, this can be someone who's received services from your organization in the past, or even a similar organization. And they have no need for recognition because they know their gift will produce good results. As an example, we worked with an organization that supports men who have been in the criminal justice system so they can have a better chance moving forward. And one day they had a call from a donor who said he was in a lot of trouble when he was growing up and had a mentor who helped him. So he wanted to help because he believed in the work they were doing and therefore made a generous donation to their organization. Having good stories of one individual, family, or situation where your organization was truly effective in bringing about positive change is very appealing to these donors. If they see themselves in that story or can relate to it in some way, that may motivate them to support your cause. With the example we shared, the donor made a gift to an organization simply because they had done a great job of sharing stories of individuals they helped, which resonated with the donor. The next motivation is moral obligation. There are donors who feel it's their duty to support your cause. The cause speaks to issues that are important to them, or they feel a moral obligation to an urgent cause, or the nonprofit heavily reflects their personal values or religious and spiritual beliefs. To appeal to these donors, you must do a good job describing the conflict or struggle that led to the creation of your organization and what you are doing to improve the situation for the community. And these individuals are also highly motivated by the testimonials of those who have benefited from your cause. Another donor motivation is influence. Examples of influence include the donor having influence directing how their money is spent, or serving on the board or a committee to help direct the organization. To appeal to this type of donor, your transparency and trustworthiness is key, so you can prove that your organization is as impactful as you say it is. And the final motivation we'll discuss is convenience. A donor can be motivated to give to your cause because you make it really easy for them to do so. Condensing your story and highlighting what's most important about your cause is very appealing to these donors. They don't need a long briefing about the entire history of your organization. Concise and helpful information that helps them conveniently find out what they need to learn about you will be most helpful. Now, most of the organizations that we work with are small shops, which is probably relatable for many of you. And what we mean by small shop is an organization that has minimal or even no staff and has volunteers who put in a significant amount of work. But whether or not your organization has a small team, it's really important that everyone participates in fundraising and that everyone learns and understands the story of your organization and can share it with a broader community. But since we've shared that many people feel a bit hesitant about fundraising, there are some tools your organization can use to ensure that everyone on the team can speak about your story with confidence. The first tool that you can use, and one important way to ensure consistency in the messaging your organization uses when communicating with donors, is to use a case for support. The case for support is an external communication tool that helps persuade donors to support your cause and understand the importance of your work. And although a case for support is a tool that's often used by large nonprofits, it's particularly helpful for small shops since it can allow team members to use and reuse the messaging when communicating with donors, which really cuts down on any prep work. The second tool that your team can utilize is using media to share your story. Short videos, and even those made with a phone, can be highly effective and particularly persuasive for donors, especially when shared from those who have benefited from your organization's work in the community. Also, short, shareable content used on social media can be a great way to interact with younger donors and introduce them to your cause. The next tool is being inclusive. Earlier in our presentation, we spoke more specifically about inclusive storytelling. But why is it important? A lot of research has been done on high net worth, mostly white male donors. But generous donors come in all income brackets, genders, ethnicities, abilities, and education levels. Ensuring that your story is inclusive may mean, for example, ensuring that donor documents are accessible, or that photos represent the diversity of the community you serve, or that the stories and testimonials that you share are respectful of the people shared about and recognize their role in their own success story. And the final tool that you can use so that your team can speak about your story with confidence is to understand your donors. One of the first things that we shared today was the idea that fundraising is really an opportunity to connect donors with a cause that aligns with their personal values. And we have to understand that not everyone will be motivated to give to your cause, no matter how important it is, and no matter how well your organization is serving the community. You can't be all things to everybody, but it's important to learn what the common characteristics of donors who are most likely to give to your organization, which we also refer to as a donor profile. And donor profiles can help you speak persuasively and confidently to donors, as your chances of securing a gift will be much higher than if you were speaking to someone not as closely aligned with your cause.
So just to review what we've talked about so far, we talked about the importance of storytelling, how to use your story to appeal to different types of donors, depending on what motivates them, and tools you could use that will help everyone on your team speak more confidently about your cause. So how then do we move from all of that information to actually asking the donor for a gift? When it comes to knowing when to make the ask, the answer is that it really does depend on the situation. But we can use what we know about a donor to inform the decision of when to ask for a gift. So let's look at a few of these factors. The first is determining how ready a donor may be to give. Generally, readiness depends on the donor's interest in your cause and their capacity to give. So just because a high net worth individual or perhaps a local celebrity that your organization knows about can afford to give to your cause, it doesn't mean that they will. They may first want to learn more about your work, your trustworthiness and effectiveness before they're willing to invest their money. Also, you may be aware that your potential donors have more discretionary income during a certain time of year, and that may also help you to become more successful when timing the ask. Another consideration is how engaged your donors are. You can get a sense of your donors' level of engagement by observing how often they interact with you. So are your potential donors perhaps subscribed to your newsletter? Are they following you on social media? Do they attend your events? If so, this can signal that they're highly engaged and potentially interested in supporting your organization with a gift. Another consideration is the communication platform that you're using. How do you intend to make the ask? For example, if you plan to send a mass email to potential donors, consider your own organization's capacity to complete that task. Is there a good time of year for you to complete that task based on the cycle of your busy periods? And that can really help inform when it's the best time to ask, simply based on how much time and resources your team has available. And finally, the last consideration we'll share is frequency. So if you have a relationship with a past donor, when should you ask again? Let's think of an example perhaps we can all relate to. If you had a friend that asked you for money every single time you saw them, you might not mind the first time or two, but eventually you'd likely start to ignore them. So before asking a past donor for a future gift, always take the time to plan out several other interactions with the donor before approaching them for another gift. So to demonstrate the importance of timing the ask, we'd like to share a couple of examples, and that will help demonstrate how timing the ask may affect the relationship with the donor and ultimately make it easier or even perhaps more difficult to secure a gift.
Rox, I'm going to present the rest because we're getting a little bit of feedback.
Oh, okay.
So I'll present. So the first example is one we're going to call the shocked donor. Here is the scenario. An individual named Don has previously made a modest donation to a local charity that he felt was doing excellent work in the community. The organization named Viva 55 Plus is a local center serving older adults that provides recreational and social activities. Don had been attending the center for over a year, about once per week, but he moved away from the community about 3 years ago and has not been in touch. He is still subscribed to the monthly e-newsletter and checks it from time to time to see what's happening at the center and to see pictures of his old buddies. The program coordinator at Viva 55 Plus decided to include Dawn in a mass email to past donors asking them to consider a donation for a new initiative. Dawn was shocked to receive this email and did not respond with a donation. So let's discuss the scenario and what may have gone wrong for Viva 55 Plus in regards to timing the ask. If we go through the 4 considerations for timing the ask, let's start with readiness. We know that Don likely considers Viva 55 Plus to be trustworthy and valuable since he formerly attended the center regularly and has shown his interest as he made a modest gift in the past. When we look at his engagement, although Don attended once per week, he has not attended in the past 3 years. So it seems that Viva 55 Plus did not consider this when timing the ask. In terms of the communication platform, Viva 55 Plus sent an email, and this was likely a good choice as they know Dawn is engaging with their electronic newsletter monthly, which is sent via email. And finally, when we consider frequency, although Don is a past donor, he hasn't really interacted with the center in over 3 years. So it seems Viva 55 Plus took too long to ask for the next gift. And unfortunately for them, Don did not respond to their ask. Now, the next example is one we'll call a success story. One day, the executive director at an organization called Together We Are Strong has a conversation with a regular program attendee named Nira. In addition to being a regular attendee, Nira has been an administrative volunteer at the organization for nearly 2 years. She has made an excellent contribution as a volunteer and knows all the staff by first name. Nira casually mentions that she'll be attending a charity event that evening. The executive director later finds out that Nira is a major donor to that charity and contributes approximately $5,000 annually. She has never donated to Together We Are Strong. The executive director asks Nira if she is interested in meeting to learn more about a new initiative Together We Are Strong is raising money for. Nira happily agrees, and the executive director emails Nira a copy of the case for support in advance of the meeting, and they have a great conversation. Following the meeting, the executive director sends Nira a proposal requesting her support, and she agrees to a generous gift in support of the initiative. So let's discuss this scenario and what some of the choices Together We Are Strong made in regards to timing the ask. Again, we'll start with readiness. We know that Nira likely considers the organization to be trustworthy and valuable since she's a regular attendee and volunteer. We also know that she has the capacity to make a gift since she's already supporting another organization with a pretty significant gift of $5,000 per year. When we look at her engagement, we know that Nira has been a committed volunteer for nearly 2 years and knows all of the staff very well. In terms of the communication platform, asking Nira for a meeting was a good choice, given the personal relationship between the executive director and Nira. Also, allowing her to see the case for support in advance of the meeting made it clear that the meeting intention was to request her financial support. Also, sending a proposal after the meeting allowed Nira to consider what she wanted her investment to be and left room for negotiation and further conversation. And finally, when we consider frequency, this is the first time the organization has asked Nira for a gift, but likely will not be the last if they can continue to deepen the relationship and handle her contribution in a trustworthy manner. Remember, as we already shared today, asking for gifts to support your organization's cause doesn't have to be something that you dread or feel like you're asking for a favor. Once you know your organization's story and use the tools to ensure your entire team can speak about it confidently, you'll be much better prepared to make the ask. Sharing why your cause is needed and important is enough to motivate many people to lend their support. But before we end the webinar, we want to share some quick fundraising tips to help get you started. The first tip is to be clear about what you need. If you recall our example with Together We Are Strong and NERA, the organization was clear about requesting a meeting to discuss a gift. You don't have to feel awkward about asking for support for your cause, but you do need to be clear when you're asking for a gift. Whether you're sending an email or meeting a potential donor, be upfront about your intentions so the potential donor is not caught off guard or left in shock, like our example with Dawn. Next is to determine a specific ask amount. For example, sending a letter asking, please consider a donation is not as strong of an ask as, please consider a gift of $25. Your fundraising efforts will be more effective when you ask donors for a specific amount of money. And finally is to thank your donor. Regardless of the amount of the contribution, we always recommend that you thank each and every donor. As we mentioned earlier, when you're timing your ask for donors who have already contributed, this will be heavily dependent on how you've nurtured the relationship with the donor after they've made a gift. Saying thank you is a simple and free action that goes a long way in developing a stronger relationship with your donors and increasing the chances that they'll support you again in the future. So this brings us to the end of our presentation today, and I'm hoping that you've heard a few things that you're able to implement immediately after today's session. If you're a small organization and you're looking for resources to help you with your fundraising, I really encourage you to head over to our website where we have free resources. We also have our short stories blog where we have articles and podcast episodes with fundraising tips and advice for small nonprofits. So before we end, are there any questions or comments?
So, Rochelle, I'm going to jump back in. I'm sorry, apologize with the issues with my microphone, but I'm going to jump in and help with the Q&A. And I've been looking at some of the questions that have come in, which are fantastic. So Rochelle and I will be happy to try to answer as many as we can. The first question, Rochelle, was it would be great if we could give some examples of very well articulated stories. If I could start, Rochelle, with them. Rochelle and I always recommend, as we mentioned, kind of personal stories of one person, one testimonial tend to be very persuasive and they appeal well to donors with different types of motivation. So certainly a personal story or a testimonial by one person tend to be really great examples of good, strong stories of the work the organization.
Okay, sorry. Actually, I'll read it, Rux, just because there's less feedback with me. So how can the case appeal to all the different donor motivation types you mentioned? That's a great question. So one thing that, regardless of the motivation, one thing that most donors really, or it appeals to most donors, is the stories of those that you help and testimonials. So when you're creating this case for support and you're wanting to appeal to donors, the one consistent thing that can help is having those stories and those testimonials from those that you've helped in the past. That's the one thing, regardless of the type of motivation. The next question here is, can you speak more or share examples of the Case for Support tool? Rux, I don't know if you wanted to take that one.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to jump in here. While we didn't really get into the details of the case for support today, outside of talking about how it is a good tool to share with donors, what I would encourage you to do is the resources that we shared today or in our resource library. We have actually a few articles on a case for support, some more information if you wanted to look more into, what can be included in a case support and how to write one.
And also in the resource, we have a resource template that we sent out today. The link should be in the chat. One of the links is to the Case for Support, and it will bring you directly to that article in our short stories blog. The next question here is, any suggestions for small island organizations to grow their donor base geographically? We find it difficult to find off-island funders who don't already have a passion for our community, but we're so small, we're running out of people to ask. Rux, do you want to tackle that one?
Sure. For sure, the question we get all the time, how do I find donors? And I know you've given a specific kind of example based on your geography and the challenges that you have. While we didn't get directly into the process for how to find donors today, or also known as prospecting, also in our resource list, we did provide something on prospecting today, but essentially we did refer to in the presentation today a slide about donor profiles or kind of figuring out more about your donors, which generally helps lead you on how to find them. So I would just sort of point you towards our resources where we have some more information on donor profiles.
Okay, the next question here is, what is the best way to engage lapsed donors that respects their readiness to donate as well as timing the ask? So that's a great question. So one of the best ways I think to engage with lapsed donors first is, if it's been a while since they've donated, I would not ask for a gift. However, I would let them know how their previous support has helped your organization, and eventually let them know of other ways that they can engage with your organization. But I would have several contacts and letting them know how their gift has helped, how they can continue to engage other than providing financial support before I ask for a donation. The next question is, how is donor capacity determined? So that's a great question as well. So one thing, there's a couple things you can do. One is you can use your donor data. So if you look at the historical giving of a donor, it can give you an indication of what their donor capacity is. Also, if you have a good relationship with that donor, or you're working towards having a relationship with that donor, you could, through conversation, determine the ask. So you could start first with using your data. And then if that donor looks like someone that you'd like to pursue a long-term relationship with, through conversation, you can, that will also help you determine their donor capacity.
If I could jump in there, Rochelle,
Sure.
if you remember one of the examples we gave today with our success story, where there was an organization that engaged their volunteer named Mira, and they did find out just through conversation, she was donating to another organization. That's an example of, engaging people in conversation and finding out more about them. You might be surprised how much you can learn about your donors or potential donors' interests or their.
The next question is, our small nonprofit has a good trifold pamphlet giving general info about the group, including testimonials. How would a case for support differ from this? Rux, did you want to tackle that one?
Sure. So first of all, that's great that your organization has something like that that you're already working with and giving to your donors. In general, a case for support will probably have more information than your pamphlet. And as we mentioned, once it has kind of the full story of what your organization does and what you're looking for, you can kind of repurpose all that information, not just to speak with donors, but to apply for grants, to send in fundraising proposals for large donors, corporate donors. So generally, it's just a bit more detailed and has kind of a full story. That pamphlet you have is probably more of a high level information, which is great for those convenience donors. And I'm glad to hear that that's working well for your organization.
The next question. First of all, I'd like to thank you for this great presentation. It's been very informative. You're welcome. My NPO is fairly new. When I approach potential donors, what do you recommend I do? Ask for a gift for a specific program or for the operation of the organization? I feel that having almost no experience in the field is a big disadvantage when seeking funds. Roxy, you want to talk about that?
I can certainly jump in. So first of all, I just want you to know you're not alone. That's a very common question. Uh, the reason that we talk about a lot of the groups and people that we work with, they get into a certain field, like for example, they want to work in environmental welfare, and lo and behold, all of a sudden they're the fundraiser. So it's not uncommon to not have experience. Um, so I think that in general, um, it is, especially for folks who have less experience, it tends to be easier to ask donors to support a specific project because it kind of gives them something really tangible to give to. Sometimes when we're just looking for general operations, sometimes for newer fundraisers, it's harder to explain what the money's going for. So I would just sort of look at your own comfort level and how well you feel you can explain. And once you have a relationship with the donor, you're able to get a gift for your specific project, that might help you to develop more specific information on your operations and what that will do to help the donor have enough information to decide whether they'd like to invest.
The next question is, do you find more success with general donation asks or asks focused on a specific project? So the thing is, I think it also, that part of it, and Rux, you can jump in, depends on the donor. So one advantage of asking for a specific project is if you know the exact amount. So let's say you have a project and that you want to fund and it's $2,000. I'm just throwing out a random number. There might be a donor who looks at that project and they're interested. And because you've attached a specific amount to it, they're like, you know what, I'll just fund your whole project. So I think that's one of the advantages of having a specific project. But again, asking for general donations, if again, you can clearly demonstrate that value to potential donors and they really connect with your cause. I think that you can find success with asking for general donations or a specific project. I don't know, Rux, if you wanted to add to that or.
I would agree. It really depends on how strong your story is, how strong your messaging is, which is what we spoke about today. So the organizations that have better success with a specific project probably just did a better job articulating what the project was going to do, and people knew where their money was going. So you have to just be really intentional about that messaging and explaining the story. But both of those campaigns could be successful, whether it's for general operations or for a specific project. So good luck to you.
And the next question here is, what do you say if a potential donor asks, what can your organization do better? This question has arisen when asking for money.
Can I jump in,
Sure.
Michelle? First of
Yeah.
all, that's an interesting question. And I wonder, to me, that gives you a little bit of information about that donor. It seems like that's somebody who possibly invests a lot in different nonprofits. So I would suggest that donor somebody you'd like to talk to, just from that question. Also, in this, not to give a non-answer, but most organizations would do better if they have more resources, more capacity. So, you can explain to your donor what you could accomplish if you're able to secure more funding. And those are generally the areas where you could do better. We could serve more people, we could have more reach, we could be more effective in what we're currently doing if we had more resources, more funding. Kind of a good way to steer the donor into more conversation about what you're doing. Rochelle, it's time for our last question, by the way, given the time.
Sure. This last one, do you have any recommendations on how to use social media to find donors, or would you recommend reaching out directly? So the thing is, I think social media could be definitely useful, especially if you're trying to engage younger donors. I think one thing I always like to talk about when finding donors is trying to start by finding donors closest to your organization or those that you already have a connection with. So those that are already in your donor database, people that are already connected to your organization, such as volunteers, um, your board. I would start there. But you can also absolutely use social media. I would use social media just to help, let people learn more about your cause and to educate people. And again, it's great for finding younger donors. But if you're looking for donors, I would definitely start with those who are already connected to your organization.
Yeah, if I could jump into, we talked about, sort of finding out how your potential donors or donors are connecting with you. So social media engagement might be one way. And in addition to what Rochelle said, if they're connected with you through social media, and then maybe several other ways that might help to kind of give you a indication that that's a stronger prospective donor.
Thank you both for presenting such a informative webinar today. Do you happen to have any final comments before we sign off?
Rox, I don't know if you wanted to close.
Sure, I will. And again, I apologize for my microphone, but I just wanted to just reiterate that I know there were some folks on the call who mentioned that, it's sort of new to you. You don't necessarily feel like you have the experience or confidence, but we just want to remind you, you're doing the work. You are the experts of your organization. You, we just want to encourage you to have confidence in that. Generally, Rochelle and I, when we meet with small nonprofits, we're quite amazed by the work that's being done, and your donors will be too. So just be proud of the work that you're doing, and understanding that fundraising is just one piece of it. And although it can be challenging, you can have quite a bit of fundraising success just based on what you know about your own organization, even if you feel that you kind of lack the experience.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Rochelle and Roxanne. I just wanted to remind everyone that you will receive a follow-up email tomorrow with a link to this webinar recording. Please feel free to share this link with your colleagues. The email will also include a survey link that you can fill out with your feedback on today's webinar. You should see a survey link pop up right here in Zoom following the session as well. And I just want to say on behalf of Charity Village, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you'll join us for our next free webinar, which will be leveraging AI for career advancement in nonprofits. You can find more information on all of this and our upcoming webinars at charityvillage.com/webinars. Thanks again for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.